Hello, welcome to my series about Frédéric Chopin's posthumous works. Today I have for you another posthumous waltz. Very famous waltz in A-flat major, waltz that has a famous nickname, l'adieux, so a farewell waltz. Why this nickname? It's very simple and it is connected with exactly with Chopin's biography, so there is no legend about that. In 1835, Chopin visited Dresden and he visited his fiancée Maria Wodzińska. At that time she was not yet his fiancée, but she was to be his fiancée. She was 16 years old that time, and she was a girl that Chopin loved with all his heart, and he thought very seriously about marrying her and having a normal family with her. That was his dream. Her family loved him. They treated him like their own son. Maria loved him very much. At least at that time. Was it really love? Or was it, 16 years old? We all know how it is. But for Chopin, who was of course older than her, much older than her, it was very deep and very important feeling. And while in Dresden, he, on the last day of his visit, gave this very waltz to Maria with a short dedication to her and played this music for her and for her family on the last day as a farewell music, as a farewell dance, as a memoir, as a memory. Something that they will remember and have in their hearts and thinking about it when he leaves. So he told Maria, please play it any time when you miss me, so that you think about me and you have me here with you. How romantic. Well, that's how it was. And I think we all were young one day and we know the feeling. So we can understand. And now let's think about it. Let's think about our young age. Let's think about all these feelings. And then we will talk about this piece and this very dedication, because this story is not so simple like I just presented for you. But what I told you now was 100% true. But let's listen now and then we will talk. yes, this music is definitely a witness of a very important time of Chopin's life, of the time of true happiness, being in love and being loved. This feeling of fulfillment, this feeling of thinking about the future with optimism, of projecting the future, of having plans, of pure happiness and family, just dreams and dreaming and being together with beloved person. But all this happened in, my friends, 1835, so when Chopin was 25 years old, when he met up with the Wodziński's family. And what we know exactly about this meeting is that Chopin gave it to Maria, he played it for them, and a few days later, when he left, after he left, she wrote a letter to him. And in this letter we can read. And now I quote Maria's letter. On Saturday, when you left us, we were all walking around sad, our eyes filled with tears. You were the subject of all our conversations. That waltz, the last thing we received and heard you play, has brought us closer together. We found pleasure, they in the listening, and I in the playing, as it reminded us of our brother. So of Chopin. Here we have the proof of what I told you before. Wodziński family treated Chopin like their own son. He felt happy with them and he felt loved. He played it for them, probably on the very last day, just before leaving their house. And you know, we have to remember that that time, back in the first half of 19th century, farewells were nothing like we have them now. The farewell that they had, we can compare maybe to a farewell of visiting our friends in Australia if we are living in Europe, let's say. Because, you know, but even then, even now it is not so far away to travel to Australia. But that time, when people say goodbye, they didn't know when they are going to meet again. They didn't know when they will meet again. They had plans to meet next year. So before them, there was a 1 year of waiting, 1 year of missing each other, writing letters, thinking about each other. Very different times, very different, my friends. And I think we should think about it. But there are some more interesting facts that we can find in source commentary of this edition that I'm using, the National Chopin edition, National Polish Chopin edition. And there are quite many different versions of this waltz. Probably you know, maybe you know other version that I played. So we are not so useful to this version that I play, I don't know, but this is the version. I chose the version which I personally like the most. Quite simple version, but in this simplicity lies the beauty, in my opinion. And first text that shocked me a little is that, of course, in September 1835, Chopin wrote this waltz into the album of the 16-year-old Maria Wodzińska. However, we can read here, extant copies of the original version of the work prove that it must have been written earlier. And perhaps only further polished in Dresden. And this is very, very possible. It is very possible that this waltz Chopin wrote a few years earlier. Probably he didn't think about Maria Wodzińska when he composed it, but we never know that. Maybe yes, maybe no, we don't know. He maybe made some changes in Dresden and then wrote it as it is for Maria. But in later years, Chopin offered autographs of this waltz to several other individuals. And this is a little like the same situation like with another waltz I've talked about, waltz in F minor. You know, he gave this waltz to at least 4 or 5 different women with the dedication only for you. You know, here we don't have this kind of dedication, but we have something else which I can understand, and I will share with you my thoughts. So just be patient. We have like 2 minutes of this, and then we go to the music, because I wanted to show you and analyze these versions that we have. We have 2 different versions, 2 different copies made by Auguste Franchomme, the French cellist, Chopin's friend. One of them is dedicated to his daughter, Cécile, and another is dedicated to Chopin's student, Jane Sterling, Scottish girl who was in love with Chopin and who invited him to Scotland to play concerts. So at least 2 other persons to which this waltz was dedicated by Chopin. Then we have another version, another autograph dedicated to another pupil, Elise Peruzzi, with the signature of Chopin and date 1837. Then we have another autograph offered to Mademoiselle Charlotte de Rothschild, so a very rich person. And it was signatured and date Paris 1842. Now we can find this copy in Bibliothèque Nationale de Paris in Paris. And we have another copy made for Maria Lichtenstein, but this probably was not made by Chopin, but by Fernando da Costa. So this doesn't count. But we have at least 3 other persons to whom Chopin dedicated this. And this is very interesting because the very first dedication is from 1837. Elise Peruzzi, Chopin's student. And you know, my friends, what I'm thinking, that probably this waltz in Chopin's head was connected to Maria Wodzińska and only connected to her. But in 1837, this relationship began to get worse and worse, cool down, and Chopin was devastated because he realized, well, there are many reasons. We will not talk about that now, but this is life, right? It didn't work. Her parents were completely against, and they managed to persuade her that it's not a good idea. Chopin's health was very bad. There were some political things also. So they were afraid of having Chopin as their son-in-law. They were simply afraid. They didn't think he is a good person to marry their daughter, even though they loved him. They definitely did. But it was a very complicated situation. We have millions of such situations in the families and the lives of people. So let's not talk about it anymore. But in 1837, Chopin decided to dedicate this waltz to his another student. Was it a kind of autotherapy? Was it a kind of, okay, let's forget about Maria, and this waltz I want to also give to another woman? Definitely, what I'm telling you now is the reason why Chopin didn't publish it, because there were many different versions given to many different people. So they were already in the air. so it was not possible to publish. And now let's go back to the music and let's take a short journey deep into this music to analyze the piece itself. We can clearly hear 4 different parts in this waltz. 2 of them belongs to part A and 2 of them belongs to part D, so-called a trio. Let's analyze the first part of part A, because the first part, the first musical period of part A is genius in itself. Only this part is genius. Let's listen again and then let's talk about it. Let's think about the character. What is the character? So this is the first musical period. We had 2 phrases, but how it is constructed? It is not constructed typically for Chopin, as you know, short, short and long. No, this is an exception to this rule. We have very short statements, 2 bars long, and they are repeated. But not exactly the same, of course, but 2 bars stop, 2 bars stop, 2 bars stop, and 2 bars stop. And these 4 repetitions of the same motif belongs to the first antecedent phrase. So the first phrase of this musical period. Now let's analyze them. The left hand throughout the whole this part has the very typical waltz rhythm. When 1 is much more important than 2 and 3, and 1 is to be held by the finger. That's how it's written. So, the character, what is the character? Melancholic, nostalgic, dreamy, a little. But this character is made by the right hand, because the right hand, my friends, has... It starts already from the chromatic, 3 chromatic notes, which gives us the impression of kind of suffering or pain. But then, this energy that was created at the beginning is going down. Until this note. And this is like the skeleton of the whole phrase, of the whole first part. So let's listen. This is the note, then this note, then the next one, and then... So from here to here, we made a journey. When we reach this note, then we have a very long jump up into the air, something that is quite difficult for a singer, and very famous in this waltz. This big jump. This is the like signature of this waltz. This. And this is the last of these 2 bars phrases. Now let's count them and listen to them again, and let's count the first one, the second, the third, and the fourth. And this is the first phrase. What is also so special in this phrase that all these motifs has the same kind of rhythmical structure, ta 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 ta, and especially the ending, long, short, is very important, because always this long note is it's like how to say in English, anticipated note, suspended note. I think that's the correct name in English. Suspended note. We are waiting for the next note to come. We are waiting. We don't really want the note we hear, but we hear that the next note is coming. Now, if we get rid of this wrong notes, so-called, the long notes, the waltz should sound like this. But instead of that, we always have this anticipation, this waiting here, 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 and here. Yes? So this, it makes it very special. And then this is the first phrase, and the second consequent phrase is a fantastically written variation on what we've heard. So variation of the first phrase. Let's now compare. So the first two bars motif, this one. The second time sounds like this. The second motif sounds like this. The third is exactly the same. And the last one is different because it ends the whole phrase. Ends the whole musical period. So, now let's listen one more time. Consequent phrase and the variation. And then we have the second short intermezzo, because I think that's the good word. Short intermezzo. It doesn't really have the melody, because let's listen to this. Back to the part A, the beginning. So it was just a short intermezzo. What's so special about this intermezzo? Where was the melody? I mean, there is no melody really. There is more, I would call it a character. But which hand is more important? Which hand should we listen to? We don't know. Because both hands has something important musically. Right hand has 4 times the same motif, exactly the same. And so it is stable. There is a metaphor of some kind of stabilization. The left hand has a phrase. So they work together, but they are both important, and it's up to the pianist which voice to bring out. We can do one time this one time another one. Let's try the first time the right hand. The second time the left hand. And then we come back to the beginning. Okay, so this is part A. Then we have the trio. And the trio has also two parts. The first part is very warm. We feel good. It consists on a very fine waltz-like accompaniment. 1, 2, 3, 1. Very simple. 1, 2, 3. No chords, only simple notes. And in the right hand, we have the thirds. And the thirds, from that time in Chopin's music, usually symbolized a couple, two persons in love. We had it in mazurkas especially, but in a few in nocturnes also, of course, from that period of time exactly. So here, because there are people too close to each other, so we have thirds. And we have the left hand, but there is also a very interesting one note D flat with the accent 4 times, actually 8 times if we do the repetition, like a bell or like a clock. And it can have two meanings. The first meaning is that there is one note separated from everything, pom, pom, like you know, like some kind of signal, some kind of bell. But it can also be a continuation of these thirds, like splitting these thirds, separating them, because we can consider it as a thirds, and now the same thirds, but first we have the bottom voice, and then the upper voice, and then together. So instead of this kind of melody, we have the bottom voice first and the upper voice second. Bottom, upper, together. Bottom, upper, together. Bottom, upper. Bottom, top, and together. That's the first part of the trio. The second part of the trio brings a little tension. We are building the energy and then reaching the climax with some kind of tension and question, a little dramatic, very little. And then we go back to the first part of the trio. So, and this doesn't have character of a waltz. For me, it more has the character of mazurka, because here we have the chords, 3 voices. Is it done on purpose, or is it done not on purpose, subconsciously? We don't know, but if I were to dance this, I would dance more in a mazurka style than rather than a waltz. But then we go back to the waltz. with the capo, we are going back to the beginning. You know, for me, the first melody is like, it's talking. It's talking. It's so much talking. It's so much recitativo-like. It's something very similar to what we have in a first ballad. Here especially. Right? We have very similar, a lot of similar melodies to connected with ballad number 1. Probably it's written in very same period of time. So, a little masterpiece, unfortunately not published, but fortunately we know it. It is alive, and we can play it and we can enjoy it. And now I want to play it for you again. And before I play, I will think about it. I will imagine myself spending time with my beloved and her family, like Chopin, and just before I leave for a long journey, I want to play for them one last time this little memory, which I leave to them so that they can think about me when I leave. Thank you very much for watching, and see you again. Bye bye.